Hello, everyone. Welcome to Progress Reimagined. I'm your host, Kathleen. Today with us is Clara G. Clara is an architect and a builder. And what makes Clara unique is that she's at the intersection of regenerative architecture and collective housing, as well as technology. The way she approaches architecture is that she combines traditional architecture expertise with cutting-edge digital technology to make housing commons accessible to mainstream. And she's currently wearing multiple hats, working as a regenerative architecture consultant and running a co-op housing incubator and conducting research at the same time and serving as DAO operators at the org tech. And her work explores how self-organization and digital innovation can transform our approach to housing and land ownership. So welcome, Clara.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So what is that one thing in your field that many people believe it's true, but it's not?
So I would say it's housing as a commodity. It's the fact that we're so disconnected that housing is a basic need and a human universal right to become an asset that we can trade, sell, buy, exchange, and store value. So the problem is that we're using it as a store of value and a speculation tool rather than what is actually need, which is for shelter and protection.
I see. So housing is a basic need, and it's not a commodity that people tend to think it is.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. An ideal world, at least a part of the real estate market is not under speculation, and it's not following the rule of housing as a commodity.
Great. So what is regenerative housing? How does that look like, and what is an ideal regenerative housing for everyday people?
So yeah, could probably picture a vision in different angles. So when it comes to environmental design, it would be adapting the home into the actual local climate, making, taking into account the climate, the site conditions for temperature regulation, ventilation, daylighting, lining, protection from the sun. Then we add passive system, which makes that the home doesn't need to rely as much on heating or cooling systems. And we do that through insulation, thermal mass, shading, vegetation, combining vegetation as well. And then the next step is making this building zero net energy in terms of they use renewable energy, solar panel, wind turbine, to produce as much energy as they consume, and even they could create a surplus. And so we are talking integrating these buildings with the nature, and that also means storing rainwater, separating gray waters from green waters. We can also purify the water inside the same housing or housing block, and then we strive for regenerating our surrounding area, right? So ideally, houses could produce as well food, either if it's on land or through vertical aquaponic practices, for example. And then in terms of materials, we would strive to use materials that are locally sourced, low impact in construction. And sometimes I talked about earth construction, timber frame structures. We also have bamboo, which is considered that could be the iron of the 21st century. And then we can incorporate some technology and integrate some technology to these systems to make it more efficient. And I just mentioned an anecdote. I have a friend who designed an automation for the chickens. So there's a door that opens early in the morning, so he doesn't have to go wake up and go in real life. So that's how we incorporate as technology here. And as your question was referring to, right, how to translate that into the mainstream public, to the everyday people, we need to take into account the community and the social equity. And that means providing affordable housing access to people through shared ownership, stewardship models, that ensure accessibility for low and middle income families. And then also I'm talking about like community in a nearby surrounding. So we can also mutualize or share resources in order to decrease the prices and make that to be more like economically sustainable and viable as well.
Yes, that was gonna be my next question. How can we make that affordable to regular people? Share housing and regenerative architecture sounded really wonderful and at the same time very ideal,
Mhm.
a really ideal way of how we can thrive on this planet. But at the same time, one can imagine it must be pretty costly. And you mentioned that share housing is one way to overcome that. Can you elaborate more about how exactly that would work?
Sure. So I'll mention like some strategies, and then I can mention as well like projects that are already like in place and in this like line of return. So anyone like
Mm-hmm.
can check the pictures and maybe like have a better like understanding, because I understand that it could be tough. So in terms of like a strategy, first of all, we need to optimize the design for the affordability, and that means making spaces that are flexible, also incorporating modular design to be able to scale the units. In terms of like sizes, we need to also like decrease a bit like the sizes. And here I can potentially like, yeah, refer to legislation. So for example, in Barcelona area where I'm from, the smaller unit for one person by law needs to be 36 square meters. If it's two, it's 40, and then it increases. The numbers are most of the same in Switzerland, 35, and then for two people it's like 50, 60. We are talking about minimum spaces here. New York has like 35 square meters as well. And then in more gentrified and dense areas like Tokyo in Japan, these sizes get lowered to 15 square meters, which is quite tough, to be honest. But we get the point, right? We don't need to go to the minimum, but we can just shrink a little bit the sizes. Then in terms of construction models, if we go to more prefabrication and modular construction, what we do is we reduce the cost of labor, because we are assembling pieces in a factory and then just putting them all together when we are on the construction side, and that reduces the waste and speeds up the construction, and eventually like reduces the cost as well. Then we have strategies like community driven construction, and we see in many groups of housing communities that come together to self-organize themselves. When they go, yeah, I'll do, like, we can do the painting stuff, right? So we can also cut costs on the end, and then eventually, potentially, we are not there yet. 3D printing technology could also help us in building faster with fewer materials. There are homes built with 3D earth construction, which is an awesome material for comfort, regulating temperature, and it's also widely spread around the world. Another strategy, as I mentioned, is utilize community and cooperative community land trust models. So what we do is like we sort of like pool resources together. We collectivize the ownership, and then the community is what is like managing the housing. We can get in detail, but with that, we can ensure that these homes are going to be stable and also affordable in the long run. And because like we have like a community nearby, we can share amenities and utilities like the solar panels installation, right? Like if you have to do it on your own, it's expensive. If you share the cost of installations between like a community, and then everybody has like the surplus of energy, or they can generate energy for their own apartment, that's more, cost effective.
Mm-hmm.
We also need to implement financial models here, especially subsidized loans, grants, when we are talking about social housing or affordable housing. We would also need a long-term vision for what it comes to policy and legal frameworks, right? Because we can say, for example, in in my area, you have a law that says when we are developing a new land, we need to save small percentage for affordable housing. So that's how you protect the policy making that and ensure that there will be affordable housing. Also, we can push for tax incentives or light permits. And what we do as well in Barcelona is to partner with public-private partnerships, so we can avoid the costs of buying land. So we use land that is public, we lease it for 100 years, and then we build on top so communities don't need to buy the land, and so we can reduce costs by 20-30%.
There were a list of things. I think you mentioned about design to make it more efficient, and then construction, some of the prefabricated housing materials
Exactly.
that can be used. And then the third one, did you say 3D printing and the special materials?
Yeah, that could be. I mean, it's not ready. First, there's a company, it's called 3D West, which is making homes that are 3D printed with earth. And so there are also prototypes on bringing these printers basically in regions of Africa to build homes that are made with the material that is locally sourced on the spot earth, and then quickly be able to produce and replicate these homes more at a larger scale.
Interesting. What's the name of the company again? Curious.
It's called 3D
3D
West. So it's
Wax.
West.
Okay, 3D Wax. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, they're really cool.
And then fourth point you mentioned is cooperative housing and slash kind of community type of housing, and then that has been in the society for a while. But I suppose with the needs of affordable housing, we're going to likely to see more of that if and the demand needs increase going forward. And then fifth, you mentioned about financial support, social housing, financial support for social housing. And then sixth is the policy, kind of long-term vision, public, where collaboration between public sector and private sectors is needed. And I think that probably requires a lot of community organizations and collaborations.
100%, yeah. A lot of organization between civil groups, professionals, and then the administration. And maybe I can mention some use cases that are already taking place. For example, Vienna has a huge public market sector. So 60% of the people in Vienna, in Austria, are living in homes that are publicly owned. I mean, it was publicly developed, and that combined social housing, cooperative housing, taxes for being able to incentivize these buildings, etc. And then on the for example, like Barcelona as well, right? When we are like trying to picture, okay, how can I imagine that? Maybe I can mention La Borda. It's LA space BORDA. That's a cooperative home leasing a plot from the Barcelona City Council, and they are implementing like regenerative practices in their home. When we say like regenerative, it doesn't need to be everything green. That's one of my critiques, but it's more about using the local materials, using design strategies, and as much as possible our own resources, right? Electricity, heating systems, ventilation, etc., etc.
Got it. Today we're gonna dive a little deeper in terms of how do some of the points you mentioned intersect with technology and also regenerative architecture as well as collective housing.
Yeah.
And just curious, but before we do that, can we take a step back, if you don't mind sharing a little bit perspective on the history of affordable housing? And I think that's a lot of people's mind. What is to come, and just overall picture on the affordable housing from the past to the present, and how do you think it'll develop going forward?
That's a great question. And I love it because history is like really important. It tells us a lot. So maybe unfortunately, like this is going to be like very westernized from my perspective, but we should start with the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. So they were like basically like one law that said that dispossessed the common lands. So people like went to cities to look for job opportunities in the industrial like factories. That brought to a lot of like housing crisis, overcrowded cities and informal settlements. And the solution for that was like factories were providing as a park, let's say, the housing. So they were like, okay, workers living in the same place that where they were working, and then they were also like schools providing for the children, etc., etc. These issues brought up the first visions of collective housing, collective ownership, and self-sufficiency, with the examples of Falinister by Fourier, which was he designed a home for 1,600 people that were working aligned with their own purpose and best gifts, let's say, and also other example. And then it was collective owned. It was collective housing, so that make everybody have their own unit. But then there are some shared spaces, and there was also a harmony relationship with nature. And another like good example is like the City Garden by Howard in UK. That was experiments as well that took place actually with collective housing, collective like neighborhoods in the nearby areas of big cities that were like co-owned in terms of there were like cooperative there, and the key was planning more for neighborhoods for 30K people. Then they were connected with other home systems. So I would say these two examples are crucial to then understand, or they have influenced a lot what are the visions that we are pushing forward these days. Then we came to the post-war area where there was like a shortage of homes, and governments had to push large-scale public housing projects. And one of the most relevant, I would say, is Vienna. It's called the Red House in Vienna, where like the government these large public housing projects that were financed through progressive taxation, especially like luxury goods, high-income people, etc., etc. And that's in a strategy that they were able to protect till the day. That's why like they currently have more than 60% of the total housing that is still public housing project. In the 70s, 90s, we came up with a privatization. So there were a lot of policies that were pushing for, that were telling people, okay, this public housing that you now live, you can sell it. So it's no longer public, even though it was pushed through public funds. So we can refer to Margaret Thatcher's The Right of Buy in the UK, but also in Spain, because like in Spain, like until I guess it was 7-10 years ago, maybe less, we were pushing for public housing with public money. But then after 10 years of you living there, you could sell this property at the market price. And also like municipalities could also like sold land that was sort of like protected under like social housing. So that's like was what the tendency was. So sort of like commodifying these social public homes. And then we had like the sort of like financial crisis, housing as a global issue. We sort of like got exposed what were like the systemic issues. And then what I call more like a modern affordable crisis, we have on the Western context, we have like tourism gentrification, putting a lot of pressure, especially like through Airbnb platforms, into, the cities, the city centers, local communities that have to be displaced, because while housing prices have surged, the wages are still the same. And that's, for example, case in my house, in my hometown. Like in the last 10 years, prices have raised more than 50% on rents, and salaries only 3.4. So that's like a huge, huge abysm. And then we have on the global south, like challenges that are more related into informal housing that dominates. So that means people don't have access to basic services, water, sanitation, electricity. And also they don't have legal rights or ownership to stay in that land. So that means that when we find informal settlements that are located in, let's say, strategic city center areas, or gentrified areas, very likely these neighborhoods will be displaced in order to build luxury apartments. And I've seen that in Mumbai. I think it's a great example. Like, it is a city that is changing a lot, and from one year to the other, you can see a building disappear, and then there's a super luxury skyscraper there. And then they also lack financing options and financing mechanisms. Usually, like, they are trapped in informal lending systems or very high interest rates. And they also lack the legal and economical frameworks and policies for affordable housing. So we have these two situations right now.
In order to have a future where affordable housing is actually implemented as a basic right, how would that kind of future look like? And what are the steps that can help us to get there?
Yeah, so basically we need transdisciplinary approaches here, and a lot of collaboration as well with the local authorities. And maybe here I can add the concept of cosmo-localism. So we need to tackle localized solutions, and here I can mention also Barcelona, for example, where we are doing these cooperative homes where plots are leased by the municipality, and then the ownership of the building is collective, and then people have the right to use these spaces for as long as they want, in paying the lower rental fee than the current market. And what this means, and we call it stewardship rather than ownership. So stewardship, what it does is, since there's no exchange of I sell, when I leave I sell, and then you buy it, it's more like I transfer the right of using this space to the other person. So there's no increase of the price of the speculation. And that in the long term, it's really powerful, because that means that in 30 years, these people will be paying what currently in 2024 is like a lower rental price than the current market. So imagine in 30 years.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of hard to kind of wrap one's head around, that gap. And then we're so used to the way capitalistic system work. How would that work? Because naturally prices increase over time. Inflation is a natural kind of development. If the person in 20 years, 30 years paying the same price for the rent, how would that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a solution. Maybe we can refer to housing commons. So basically, like, commons are resources that are owned collective and managed collective. So what we are doing here is we buy collectively. Let's say, let's imagine a block of buildings, right? A block of 10 apartments. We buy that. We put this building onto a cooperative, which is a sort of like a collective ownership model. And then, as a member of the cooperative, I have the right to use the space. So here we're moving from ownership, from I own this space,
Right.
I can live in it, to I possess this space and I have the right to live here. Thus, I'm using this space. I live here. So practically, the result is the same. It's more about how we get there. And then in the long term, what happens is the fee. So there's like two fees. One is initial down payment to be able to buy collectively like this plot. And then there's a monthly fee that it's sum of the return of the credit of the mortgage, then a fee for using it, and then a fee for contributing to a larger collective pool for maintenance costs. And usually what happens is you have 30 years of mortgage, and then huge maintenance costs come after 30 years in a building. So that means that we are able to maintain this flat monthly fee. Somebody the other day sent me a community in Germany. It was a Christian community. I cannot recall the name, but basically they started in the 1970s, and currently they are paying $10 or euros per month to use that space. And that's how like they maintain the community, because like they are collectivizing sort of like the ownership, and they have like a stewardship of the place. So they have like these rights of using the spaces rather than owning the space. Then a lot of people say like, okay, but if I own, then I know that I can sort of like give this house to my siblings, to my family. And we can also like do that with the right of using spaces, right? With the stewardship, I can sort of like write as a collective agreement that I'll be able to transfer the right to use the stewardship right to my sons or daughters, for example.
I think it's important for everyone, listening. I'm also trying to remind myself to be open-minded, because we're so used to the system, and then the first reaction is like, how would that possibly work, right? And I think it's
100%.
important to really think about this with an open-minded kind of thinking. At the same time, also it obviously requires critical thinking as well.
Yeah.
This is still an area that's being developed, and one fact we know is that as the way we continue to live as the way we are, as the market decides, then many people are going to be displaced, because there's increasing inequality, and there are different solutions that need to be in place. You named a number of things, and being an open-minded, I think in this era is really important, because otherwise we won't be able to kind of figure out a new solution, right? We can't go on like the way we've been now.
Yeah, 100%. And it also like shocked me a lot when also like I discovered that like I think we are like so used to incremental prices, just like a speculation, and just like
Yes.
Capitalism sort of like dynamic. I wouldn't say capitalism. That is like hyper capitalism dynamics. But there's an alternative, and I can also like mention, for example, like in India, in Goa, cooperative housing is very regular thing, even from the 60s, 70s. Also, there are cooperative networks in Uruguay. It's called FUCAM, that also have been, on for decades. In Spain, it's true that it's only on the last 10 years that we've seen this skyrocketing on the demand of cooperative housing. But then we have also networks. I don't know how to pronounce it in German, but there's a huge network in Germany as well, in Switzerland. We have the Community Land Trust in the UK, also in Canada, in the US, if I'm not wrong. So we do have the tools, and we do have experiments around the world. It's almost like that it's not that known. And what is interesting here is just to coordinate these local nodes, local projects into local networks. So then we can mutualize some of the resources that this community needs, either for being created, being incubated, and being maintained into these like local networks. And then with blockchain technology, now I can refer to to the concept of Michel Bowen's of cosmolocalism, right?
Yes,
we have like the action in the local level, and then we have like networks that currently can be more like the transnational level that can share knowledge and resources at a large scale. So eventually, like, we'll be able to sort of like replicate these local examples using best practices from, you know, different countries. And I think like that's what's currently like revolutionary, right? So taking, okay, what's been a great example or great use practice in Barcelona, and what is a great use practice from the experience of more than 40 years in Goa, India, right? And then sharing it together, and also being able to pull resources for that.
Yeah, Michelle was just on the show in previously. So for those who haven't heard about, he's from P2P Foundation. So I was just about to say that that's if you would like to learn more about Cosmoloco, Transloco, and collaboration, cooperation, have a listen to his episode. That episode. And so basically, it comes down to knowledge sharing, and we're now with the digital information network, we can share information easily. But what's new with blockchain? I think blockchain brings a new aspect to everything.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, sort of like to give like a very basic and like foundations before starting. So what allows blockchain is sort of like peer-to-peer coordination, and that means I can easily coordinate and I can easily send money across to other people in real time without intermediaries, without central authority. That currently that's the role of banks, and also I'm able to make decisions collectively on how we manage a certain pool of money at scale. And it doesn't need to be in real life. It could be just people that are in many different like locations. For the use case of housing, and specifically affordable housing in housing commons, housing cooperatives, stuff like that, it's the access to funds. Because like what we are struggling a lot when we are doing like these projects is to find funds to be able to ask for mortgages or credits, because like traditional banks don't recognize collective ownership, so
Right.
they don't, at least in Spain, I'm talking again like from my experience, but they don't give us money. So we need to rely on ethical banks who have like a very low budget, and like all the projects are coming together to just like the same funds. And then alternative, crowdfunding sources or mutual credit funds that again, their budget are lower. So if we can rely into like a peer-to-peer lending borrow system with blockchain, that would be a great success. I know that we are still early, but we are already seeing examples of this happening with Aave protocol, Compound protocol, which are DeFi, decentralized finance mechanisms that people pull money together. They decide collectively what is like the interest rate. In the case of like Aave and Compound, I think like this year they released even like borrowing interest rates that are fixed. So that's like a need for potential scaling up to more larger amounts at a fixed term. There could be also a lot of innovation in terms of governance and ownership and stewardship mechanisms, because like currently we have, the setup that the legal frameworks of each nation designed, right? So for example, in Spain, we don't have CLT model. That's why like we rely only on the cooperative and then the foundation to sort of block the properties outside of the speculative market. So with blockchain technology, we can, and legal wrappers that are currently happening. For example, in Europe, we have Switzerland that has associations, or in the US, we also have blockchain LLCs with the decentralized organizations plus the legal wrapper. We can start innovating in frameworks that are not set internally by like nations. So we can say, okay, we want to sort of tokenize the home because like that's the trend now in this space. But let's not tokenize the ownership of the home. Let's tokenize the rights of using that home. So we ensure again that there's no speculation under, right? Or we can sort of like innovate in governance practices, in digital voting, quadratic voting, optimism, democracy, like accelerate the coordination mechanisms, or maybe enter into a time where we do have some in real life coordination mechanisms and blockchain-based coordination issues. Because we need to recall that local communities would still rely in the in real life world and presence and social networks, and that's a great way to also coordinate. But when we are going to a larger scale, we need new tools.
I
And
think.
then, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, please.
And then, yeah, one thing that is super interesting is this project. Usually, when we are incubating these projects, they take long. So, like, my obsession is how we can string time so people can who are unique and say, okay, yeah, I'll jump into this project. I don't need to wait for 5 years. So, since these projects are long during incubation phases, we can also use a staking mechanism. So we start saving together and earning while saving together, right? So I think like that's a good benefit and a good way to onboard new people on the blockchain, because it's creating money from money in a conscious and sustainable way, right? Not investing in things that we don't know. When we put money on the bank, right? When we are coordinated across networks, we can use collateral from one property to the other to be able to ask for more funds. We can also start enhancing solidarity mechanisms between the network or in the same local networks, create local economies, and put in place, put in practice, right? Like the Cosmo localism concept.
There were, well, I think we'll have the caption after the show. We'll also add some of the projects you mentioned in the show notes, and some of the words, in terms of decentralized system and quadratic funding. Some may be foreign concept to the listeners, but basically, it's what you have mentioned now is a lot of things that are taking place in the blockchain space. There are really practical use cases for blockchain and for what we do in terms of financing and funding. It's a very interesting and exciting and overlooked space, don't you think?
100%.
People in this blockchain space kind of fully aware of this, but people outside of the space feel this is blockchain is just more Web3. It's about this casino culture, but it's really on the things that you don't see underneath the surface that's interesting, that are less talked about, which is a new way of funding, financing. It's that which is separate from that casino culture, isn't it?
100%. And also, I would say a lot of mechanisms that we see in the Web3 culture are actual mechanisms that are already happening in real life, right? I was just telling you about mutual credit funds, and so borrowing and lending protocols are just putting that
true on chain
with technology on chain,
right?
And then tweaking with other extra features that blockchain give us, but it's not creating things from scratch or new things from scratch.
True. So tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you become an architect, and why is regenerative housing and design important to you? Like why is affordable housing important to you?
So I'll start quickly with my journey through architecture. So it was basically like very passionate from maybe when I was like 4 or 5. I was always like playing with dolls or Playmobiles or Lego, or even like on gaming stuff. I only like to design the space, and I was like, that's all. And so I pursued the architecture degree. And when I was already at the university, I received some grants to start working in Argentina, India, and Morocco on more vulnerable communities, sort of studying what were like the needs and also pushing for alternative materials to make sure the conditions of living could be improved and empower those people with new techniques of self-construction. And then, at 15, I think I was like very lucky because I met what is my architecture mentor, Luis Alquet. And then, so when I started like my degree, I started like working with them. I learned a lot from him. He has like a practice of maybe like more than 40 years, just like building these types of regenerative homes nearby Barcelona. And my sort of like obsession was if we want to have a greater impact, like how we can bring all these, ways of designing homes and ways of designing, integrating nature and using nature and local resources to the mainstream public. And that's how I got involved into cooperative housing, social housing. And then I took a gap year, started traveling. Basically, I was backpacking in India, but I was researching a lot on new stuff, just basically going into random rabbit holes. And that's how I discovered blockchain and I started understanding the technology. And then 2020, during lockdown, I did my first hackathons, which was like a DAO templates for community and housing projects. So I was like already obsessed. And it really helped me having a role on having a proper job in the Web3 space to have like this direct contact with mostly developers, because I feel like to me it's been a great inspiration to be around them. That's why I keep working at the org, which is a collective, a cooperative / DAO of developers that we provide services for amazing projects in the Web3 space and public goods projects in the Web3 space, DeFi, whatever. But it's great because I'm in the sort of like edge of new technology, and then I can see what we can incorporate, having the knowledge from the in real life experience of incubating housing projects and knowing actually what are the needs. And sorry, that was the first bit of the question, and then I got lost on what was the second bit of the question.
So why is regenerative housing important to you, design?
Yeah, so in one place, it's because housing is a universal right, that it's not implemented, even if it's embedded into many of our constitutions, including that the government will look for the non-speculation of the land, which is absolutely like not put in practice. Second, probably like it's also for personal reasons. My grandparents were kicked out of their place because they weren't renting after more than 150 years, because it was like a family rental contract. And also my family's been always in rental mode. And as a young person in Barcelona and having all my friends and being in contact continuously with people who maybe have 3 masters, speak 5 languages, have good jobs, and still are not able to afford a home. They need to be sharing spaces unwillingly, and then we question why people don't have children in the Western countries, because it's unbearable. The situation is really complex right now. And then I would say also with the privilege of being able to travel, I've seen the realities in other countries, right? And then also like seeing how can I frame it, like how lucky you are depending on in which place you were born, right?
Yeah.
And so that determines like your protection, shelter options, as well as your opportunities. So I feel like if you have like the privilege to being born in a country and also like working for, a public good sector, like it's architecture on my way of thinking, it's just a privilege to choose to work on that direction and to just add this grain of salt into the whole evolution of society. And then I also like, why regenerative? Because I think that we need to strive for having a more harmonious relationship with nature, because we treat it as it was infinite and as if resources were abundant, and they are abundant, but we need to make sure we regenerate them so we keep having them, because otherwise we're just going into finite resources. And also because through design, it's really awesome how you can improve the way people live, either if it's more like a local scale architecture, so you can, by design, you can enhance the comfort of people, also the social relationships that people will have inside these places. But for example, when we are tackling these at a larger scale with urbanism, we can design places that are more healthy for people, because the design of the cities impacts the quality of the air, and that's a good metric for just evaluating how design impacts the health of the people, right? So just combining the three reasons, I think it's fine here.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I think we're towards the end of the conversation, and I want to ask you, what kind of advice do you have for those who are looking to play a part, or who are open-minded? I guess you kind of, or if you're skeptical, you should also figure out more whether this is feasible, right? Affordable housing
100%.
for everyone is feasible, and how do we tackle that problem? So if for those who wants to contribute or looking for ways to learn more, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love it. So usually in my talks, I give 4 steps depending as well on your time and privilege, because having time available is also a privilege. But it's about being able to self-organize. So step 1, it would be just start looking for if there's like tenants union in the nearby area. Because usually people, the first step is just organizing themselves to protect from abusive practices that are usually perpetrated by corporate landlords. I'm not talking here about the small landlords. The second one is to push initiatives through these tenants unions to parliament, and that's why we've seen that in New York, Berlin, Paris, Barcelona, Vancouver, there are rental limitations or Airbnb restrictions for ensuring that rents don't get above a certain level, or we retain speculation a little bit. And then the third one would be to start looking for friends or people around your local area that are in the same struggles as you. And then start talking about what are the alternatives. So maybe eventually you are able to, create your own community in a stewardship mode. Also start researching. Do a lot of research with, I give over some network of housing communities that are working on this and around the world. So go check them out, talk to them. And then the fourth step would be, once you have your own housing community, start networking. So put it on a network. So then you'll be more protected and through the community, and then you'll be able to pull funds together, have like more solidarity mechanisms maybe there, and also locking these properties in foundations, so we are able to ensure that this system could be, maintaining in the long run. So there's no like dispossession of these housing commons. So if you are working on this field, just like building something that housing that could be like a use case, like feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to talk to you. As I said, like we need a transdisciplinary approach to tackle the affordability in housing. So we need architects, but we need lawyers, economists. We need a lot of like developers as well. So everybody is welcome. This is like 100% a transdisciplinary issue.
Really appreciate your time with us today, sharing what you have learned so far. And I think it's really, really amazing. And it'd be cool to see a community started because of this, right? I think bringing people together, tackling the problem in a translocal way, sharing the knowledge globally, and then implement it locally. And what's the best way? So what's the best way for people to contact you?
So I'm in Twitter. So it's Clara G. You'll look it and you'll find me. And then also, I have a website. Maybe we can link it down on the description. It's claragromaches.com. And so feel free to contact me.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Clara. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, Kathleen.
Looking at some of the major cities around the globe today, It's clear housing has become increasingly unaffordable, affecting both families and young professionals trying to build their futures. What resonated most from the conversation with Clara is the power of community. She shows how housing cooperatives combined with innovative ideas and tools like blockchain can enable better decision-making and financing. Building on successful models like Vienna's public housing program while exploring new solutions shows us what's possible when communities collaborate. Home provides the foundation for human dignity. The tools are here, from proven models to emerging technologies, as we've designed cities, turned light into power, and connected the world. Ensuring everyone has a home is within our reach when communities work together. This is Kathleen Chu for Progress Reimagined. Be part of our journey by subscribing to our channel or wherever you listen to podcasts.